Chapter 109 to 111. I was walking through the market, a small smile on my face as I just eyed everything around me. There were many stalls, some people hawking their wares, and some legitimate storefronts with open stores, beckoning people to come and take a look. It really was a big difference from the more residential and industrial aspects, which would be expected, except there were plenty of smaller versions of this happening here or there. If there was a demand, then there would be a need. I doubt everyone living on the fringes of Vale would want to walk all the way here then back home for some light grocery shopping. But I digress. I was drawing attention, but I didn't care so much right now. Isn't that? Wasn't he a criminal? Should we call the police? I heard he killed a titan. Is he single? I almost tripped hearing that last whisper. It was an older woman, a much older woman. Nope. I wanted to evacuate immediately after that, but something caught me attention out of the corner of my eye. I turned to look at a man sitting at a stall, shirts hung everywhere. Taking a few steps over, he seemed to notice me. See anything you like, we have the latest. He stopped, staring at me, then looking at one of his shirts hanging up. I walked up, staring him in the eyes, placing a hand on his shoulder. You're doing good work. I'll take 5. He turned around and quickly pocketed the money after I picked out a few sizes, eyeballing them. With my new prize, I made my way through the market for a little while longer, grabbing something here or there. Saw a couple things I would be grabbing as gifts. Didn't want to see Kunu again without getting her a little something. My cute little daughter. Honestly, I kind of want to see Yasaka again as well. Izzy, I wanted to hang out with her some more. I couldn't help but sigh as I thought about everyone I had been away from so far. I really want to complete my project and get my house connected everywhere. To have everyone know each other so I don't have to keep jumping around when I want to visit the people I care about. As I finished up and approached Junior's Club for the final time in the next few months, I stopped my moping, putting on a small smile. I'm back. I pushed open the doors, announcing my presence. The familiar faces of the gang met mine, some half-hearted acknowledgements. It was sort of a going-away party, if it could be called that. More like, sitting around and drinking until we had to skedaddle. Kid, we got an update. Roman waved his hand in the air to grab my attention before pointing to Junior. Got a tip that Vale's going to make an announcement in solidarity with Mistral later tonight. Junior sighed, rubbing his eyes. Didn't think they'd do it this quickly. Well, we prepared for the worst. I shrugged. You have somewhere to go? Miltia casually asked, though she didn't do a good job of hiding that worry in her tone. I guess I could go visit my daughter and her mother for a bit. I waved her off. I would see if I could stop by before heading to Skyrim with Rin and Artoria. You have a daughter. Milsha's shocked expression mirrored everyone else. Is that weird? I asked. Damn, I have a granddaughter. Roman lit his cigar. You're not my dad. I deadpanned. Actually, I put the adoption papers through. Roman retorted. Wilhelm Torchwick, it has a nice ring to it. I'm 20 years old, I think. Time wasn't a perfect measurable variable when in the land of shadows. Hi, 20 years old, I'm dad. Roman looked very impressed with himself. I hate you. I know. He smirked. Can we go back to him having a daughter? Miltia interrupted, even Neil looking interested, poking Roman to stop his shenanigans. What? I looked around. Is that so weird? Yes. Yup. Definitely. Neo gave a thumbs up. I don't care. I rolled my eyes, taking out my scroll and revealing a picture of Kunu. It didn't show her tails, thankfully, just her fluffy ears. I actually took a picture of my phone screen so I would have it on my scroll as well. Didn't turn out bad at all. A faunus? She's too cute to be your daughter. You actually convinced a woman to sleep with you? I looked around the room. I'm feeling very attacked right now. And she's not my daughter by blood, kinda got adopted by her a while ago, and this is how it turned out. Yeah, figured since she looks at least 10. Would be weird if you were the father. Miltia admitted. The other nodded in agreement as I gave a flat look. Okay, so you all just wanted to take shots at me. Why did I expect any different? I put it away. Stop being a baby. Miltia huffed, tapping her finger on the counter. You could bring her around, or something when everything dies down. My club isn't a daycare. Junior grunted, but shrinked down when Miltia gave him a death glare. Whatever. He dropped it pretty easily. Just don't bring her around Roman, he's a bad influence. Pretty sure he's racist. Melanie added. I'm not racist. Roman defended himself. I'm offended that you would think so low of me. Aren't you constantly saying racist shit towards Faunus? Melanie asked. First off. He set his cigar on an ashtray. I do that on purpose, because the majority of the Faunus we work with are involved with that white faun terrorist crap. So you just do it to piss them off? I looked at him. The corners of his lips curled up. Why else? Do you really think I would care that a person has animal features or not? That's a really fair point. You would definitely spout racist shit against humans if it had the same effect. Glad you understand me, kid. Roman nodded in delight. That being said, if I hear any of your crap around my daughter, if I ever bring her near you, which is very unlikely, I will break your legs. Oh wow, you really are a dad. You got that whole, he waved his hands. Dad aura going on. He stated, letting out a chuckle. Don't worry yourself, brat, I don't go picking on kids for shits and giggles. Junior was liberal with the drinks, not that I would ever be paying here again anyways. I make sure to remind Roman of his little deal whenever possible. By the way, I got going away presents for everyone. Oh, kid, you shouldn't have. Roman spoke first. I take cash or check. I took one of the shirts out of my ring and tossed it at his face. So you all can remember me fondly in these coming months. I passed the remainder around. Really? Junior held the shirt up to himself. I know, I didn't think it was possible to make a t-shirt so sexy. I shook my head, forcing myself to look away. Junior, I hope you'll use this newfound power of yours for good. To wear something that spectacular, panties will drop from just glimpsing it. You're the worst. Miltia looked at her shirt. Going right in the trash. Melanie added. Well, I needed a rag for when I changed my car's oil. Roman nodded. I looked at Neo, who was now wearing the shirt. I knew it, you're the best. I gave her a thumbs up, she happily reciprocated. They were shirts with my face plastered all over. You know, I suddenly feel like the club just got significantly more class, weird. Fuck off. Junior snorted. Hee hee. I lightly laughed as he threw the shirt back in my face. As fun as this is. Roman pushed his cigar against the ashtray, putting it out. I really want to skip town before they get smart enough to lock the city down. That's probably for the best. Junior nodded, with perhaps a tiny bit of sadness. I don't think he would admit it, but he likes having people around like this. I guess I'll head out too. May as well. I had a few more things I wanted to check out here before departing the world for a while, otherwise I was in the wind. Stop fucking pussyfooting around and go. Miltia huffed, but at this point I could kind of read between the lines. She wanted me to get going before I ran into any trouble. Hug? I offered, arms open. She rolled her eyes. If it gets you out of my hair faster. She held her arms open as I scooped her up. She made a little noise in embarrassment before I let her go. I'll see you in a few months. Fine, whatever. She crossed her arms and turned away. I felt a little tug on my sleeve. Neo was looking at me bashfully, holding her arms open. Really? I looked at her. She tried her best to put on an innocent face. No stabbing. I stated, holding my arms out. She pouted but gave a silent giggle and a quick hug. We'll stab people together later. Felt like I didn't get to know her much these past days, but we got along well all things considered. That got a genuine smile from her. Sheesh, this mushy crap is going to make me sick. Roman gagged audibly. And what's up with you, Neo? You don't usually get attached that easily. Neo shrugged her shoulder before flicking her wrist. A wallet appeared in her hand as we all stared at her. You know what? Well done. I admit my defeat there. It was a fake wallet, well, not really fake, but just something I picked up here randomly to store my lean in so I wouldn't have everything stored in my ring to retrieve. Surprisingly though, she took it completely without my noticing. Melanie. I turned to the other twin. Fuck you. She gave me the bird. I nodded. Fuck you too. I replied, earning a small smile from her. Lastly. Junior. You were surprisingly not the most annoying person I've ever had to work with. Junior said with a certain amount of honesty in his voice. That will always be Roman, though you are in the top 10. Top 10? I asked. Roman, I need tips on how to score higher. Get the fuck out of my club. He snorted, though it lacked any kind of venom. What about me? Roman feigned indignance. Roman. I paused, trying to think of the correct words to say. Your hat is stupid. That's it, you're disowned. He exclaimed. We both sat there for a moment before chuckling. Kid, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but you are someone I have come to tolerate. He practically choked up. Thanks, Dad. I deadpanned. Anytime, kiddo. He shot me with a finger gun. Well, time to leave on that utterly low note. Tossed the shirt back at Junior. See you all, hopefully, in a few months. I opened up a portal and left. I stepped into the Forever Fall Forest one more time. Definitely my favorite place on Remnant so far, I could easily see myself building a home out here. Flipping my hand over, I took out the lamp, summoning my genie. Hello again. Jin greeted, stretching like she had been sleeping. How may I service you, my master? She smiled. You mean, be of service? No. Of course. I didn't even question it at this point. Hey, is it uncomfortable being in my storage space while you're in your lamp? She tilted her head at the question. I suppose that falls under my uses, technically. She mused. It is a strange feeling, like finding my house suddenly adrift in the sea without anything on the horizon. I can keep lamp out for now on if you want. If that would not be too much trouble. She seemed pleased. You know, you're allowed to ask things of me. The worst that I can do is say no. I didn't want her to be afraid of me, it left a strange feeling in my stomach. She smiled bright at that. If that is what my master desires. She walked up, touching the lamp. The relic has certain features to it. She stated, as it began to shrink down to a size which I could fit in my palm. Well, that's convenient. I blinked at the small object now. Makes me wonder if I can mess with it some more. I rubbed my chin and thought. The outer shell seems entirely malleable even with the concepts woven into its creation. Did your brother gods not think anyone would mess with it after it was created? Is that a question? The dry look she gave me basically confirmed my guess. They weren't the most intelligent sort, were they? She let out an uncharacteristic groan. Is that a question? I sensed some hostility there. I laughed. But I do have a question to ask. She perked up immediately, the area around us freezing in time. She played it up, magics floating around us, building up the atmosphere. Ask your final question for this century. I thought of something, a mischievous smile formed on my face. Actually, I changed my mind. She just blinked, nodding as the effects around us dissipated. You know what? I actually will have that question now. Once again, time paused. What is your? Changed my mind. Time resumed. On second thought. Time paused. Nah, better not. Time resumed. Oh, I suddenly thought of. No. She huffed, crossing her arms, pouting in annoyance. It almost made me sigh how I couldn't even sense his magic anymore. Without direct contact, my magical senses were practically non-existent. Even my own magic that I gifted a few decades prior to him that allowed his transformations. Good morning, Crow. I greeted politely all the same. Heya, Oz. He raised a flask in greeting. Crow, do you really need to start drinking this early? Glinda scowled, though we both knew it was a losing fight at this point. No, after Summer Rose died, he never let go of that flask she gave him, its contents always filled. I suppose we all cope in our own ways, I certainly can't throw stones from my glass house. At least he can still be productive, it took me several lifetimes to get my act together after. I didn't wish to dwell on those thoughts right now. I didn't start drinking this early. He smirked. I haven't stopped drinking since last night. Well, that is certainly one way to rationalize it, I suppose. Oh, Oz, I got something I wanted you to look at. He fumbled around his pockets until he realized he had a small sling over his shoulder. Ruby was having trouble smelting this, even the smiths she visited couldn't make heads or tails of it. He took a rather strange-looking ingot of metal out and set it on my desk. I have never seen a metal like this before. Which was certainly a strange thing in of itself. Where did you acquire it? I put my hand on it, and I couldn't help but have my eyes widen, a familiar feeling lightly pulsing out. Some kid was saved by the shorty. Got lost somewhere and she helped him or something. I was barely paying attention. He took another drink from his flask. Said it was a reward for Ruby. I told her I'd go ask some people if they knew what to do with it. This metal is magical. I stated plainly, a mild amount of shock on my face. Wait, what? Crow paused mid-drink, staring at me. Are you sure, Ojvin? Glinda gave me a surprised look. I couldn't fault them for their reactions. Anything magical beyond dust was practically lost to the world. Even finding the most primitive magical tool would be a large boon unheard of in several lifetimes. To actually hold a metal that held magical power in it, it was a strange feeling. As reduced as I was, I could almost feel magic from touch. I am almost certain. I nodded, staring at the strange metal. Where did you acquire it, Crow? Hopefully he would have a more thorough explanation. He scratched his head, seemingly trying to focus his thoughts. Some strange kid was helped out by Rubes. She took him home, met Ty and myself. He was thankful for the help, said he got lost due to some semblance mishap or something. He paused for a moment. Oh, and he pulled a rabbit out of his hat, said he was a magician. I blinked at his statement, that was certainly not what I expected. Like stage magic, or something else. Well, he didn't seem like a wizard, Oz. And I didn't exactly ask him, if that's what you're asking. That was fair, and I'm merely grasping at straws here anyways. Well, actually. Crow paused again. Ruby did say something about them sparring, and he beat her with a stick. A stick? Glinda asked. Ruby is still very young, but her talent is undeniable. She would perhaps match the average at Beacon right now. Well, I didn't really give it any thought and Crow looked like he just realized something. She said it was after he cut a tree in half, with a stick. I let out a sigh, but once again, I couldn't really fault him. How much of what Ruby said could be interpreted as merely her youthful imagination or exaggerations? That's still not evidence. Glinda raised a very fair point. She is correct. We've been fooled into thinking that a semblance was magic in the past. Well, we fooled ourselves before. It was easy to jump to conclusions about such a thing when you truly hope for it to happen. Oh, right. He said his semblance was space manipulation or something. He leaned against the wall. Oh, well. I suppose that is still impressive in of itself. That explains it then. I nodded. I could think of many ways to utilize a broad semblance like that for the applications witnessed. And it isn't hard to assume he merely found the metal somewhere. Magic was dead, it wasn't coming back anytime soon. What kind of space manipulation? Raven also has a variation of that. Glinda asked, drawing our thoughts to Crow's wayward sister. It made tracking her down very difficult when she could open portals to people she had bonds with. I don't know. Crow shrugged. I didn't really ask him anything other than seeing if he knew Raven. That would be a quick conclusion to jump to for him, even if it was a complete shot in the dark. Just because semblances are related in some aspect, does not mean the people possessing them are. What was he like? I asked. If nothing else, it might be beneficial to get him on our side. Dressed well, seemed like he had a sense of humor. Crow took another drink. Nice enough, I guess. He gave off the feeling like one of those aristocrat types in Atlas, but with a lot less snob. Crow was being flippant, but that was helpful information. I would need to check in with James, maybe ask around. Did you get a name? He scratched his head again. It was something long, didn't follow the colors. That's rare these days. Glinda added, seemingly used to Crow not giving detailed information. I did enjoy the color naming conventions that popped up. A show of unity across both faunus and humanity in a dark hour. But the fact that he didn't use it was good information in of itself. Just keep an eye open, he could prove useful to pull to our side if he has a powerful semblance. Right-o. Crow replied nonchalantly. At that moment, the scroll began to buzz, a familiar man on the other end as I answered, his face showing up on the large screen at the front of my office. Good morning, James. I hope you are having a wonderful day. I wish, Ashvin. James Ironwood's stern voice came out of the speakers. The council is dragging its feet on several issues. Something I know all too well. I nodded at his plight. I too had to deal with the Vale Council too much for my liking. Are we all here and ready? James asked. You were the last one, Tin Man. Crow stated. James didn't deem it necessary to respond, his gaze turning to Glinda. Glinda, a pleasure as always. James. She nodded to him. The tension that never went away after their small tryst a decade ago. I decided it was a good idea to move along. I am looking forward to this year's tournament. We have quite a few good seeds. James' eyes lit up. Don't you dare steal all them again, Ashvin. He stared at me, though a small bit of playfulness in his voice. Lionheart already has a huge advantage, and I heard he was doing tours of Haven as well. Oh, that is smart. I rubbed my chin. Perhaps we should start doing something similar before the school year begins? Offer tours of the facilities, it may draw up some potential interest. I wouldn't be against it, but we're already running around before the year begins, we need to look into hiring more hands. Glinda replied. She's been pushing for more staff for a while now. All right, Glinda. Provide me with a list of potential teachers and I'll give it a look. It is true we need to expand a bit. And more trusting hands around here would be a boon. Glinda practically beamed under my words. I already have one created, I will deliver it to you later today. Of course. Just as I would expect from the woman I chose as my successor for Beacon Headmaster. As fun as this is, can we start? Crow interjected. Yes, of course. We were getting quite sidetracked. We're a little behind as it were. I began to play the stream of the tournament. Go fuck yourself, Lil Miss Malachite. Love, Roman Torchwick. Pfft. Crow spit his drink out in surprise, and I had been lucky. I also was not sipping my beverage for I fear I may have had a similar reaction. What? Glinda looked on in shock. Roman Torchwick, isn't he that thief in Vale? Why is he calling out Malachite like that? James immediately began to contemplate the message, seemingly uncaring about the words themselves. Forget that, Oz, that's the kid. The kid? I questioned until realization dawned. He is the one who gave the medal to Ruby? Yeah, would recognize him anywhere. What medal? James asked. Magic medal, gift to Ruby. Crow abbreviated, which was surprisingly accurate. I would like a further explanation later. James commented. But is there anything I should know about him? Nothing important just yet, he seems to possess a space-based semblance. I commented. James's eyes twinkled. Is that so? I suppose he would try and get his hands on this person himself. I would not stop him. If he were successful, then it would be beneficial to us as well. I took out my own scroll and looked through the information available. Wilhelm Henry Schweinorg. Certainly a unique name in this era. I'm going to pound him so hard, his mom is going to be jealous. His opponent providing some mocking words, and I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow at Wilhelm's face. This would not bode well for young Gundy. I could recognize a cold anger well enough. Why does his record say all buys? Crow was looking over his own scroll. Looks like someone is messing with the tournament. Glinda herself was pulling up her own information. They aren't even being subtle about it. Roman Torchwick, perhaps? James offered. But he usually doesn't venture out of his own lane. This is a far cry from his thefts. Roman Torchwick. He's a very notorious thief here in Vale, but he's never been close to a priority. He's smart enough to stay away from anything that drags too much attention, hurting innocents, murder, theft of government property, and such. Why would he be doing this now? It is a good theory as any. I agreed with James's initial assumption. BOOM, the cameras shook from the arena, the entire thing filled with smoke as one of the fighters was blasted out of the ring. And Wilhelm just casually strode away without another word. A dust bomb? James muttered. No, that was just a crystal. How did he achieve that kind of payload with only a single crystal like that? Most peculiar. I agreed. As much as I hate to admit it, it was a sufficient strategy to deal with an armored opponent like that. Glinda grumbled. Please, we all know he wasn't doing that as a strategy. Crow rolled his eyes. Quite. And I do not believe it was technically against the rules. I stroked my chin. James didn't seem to mind either, as he kept rather quiet. He was quite the stickler for rules, but he also appreciated a creative use around them. If you all wouldn't mind, how about we fast forward to his next fight? I wish to see this young man again. Whatever. Crow didn't seem to care. The next few matches don't look like they will hold any suspense. If you wish to jump ahead, I'm not against it. Glinda also agreed. Go ahead, Ashvin. James agreed as well. I'm also a bit curious. Very well. I began tapping away at the screen, catching up with the live broadcast a bit until this Wilhelm appeared again for his next match. Ah, here we are. He took a corner of the ring with a new opponent. That is Cobalt, I believe. James spoke first. I was eyeing him previously. I thought his semblance would be quite beneficial as a specialist. I don't see his semblance listed anywhere. Glinda frowned, staring at her scroll. I have good people under me. James smirked. We narrowed it down to a few possibilities, but they all would be a boon to have. James was usually quite proficient with his information gathering. I had no reason to doubt him. We all silently watched the upcoming fight. Young Cobalt was the first to engage, and I could immediately tell he was outmatched. Wilhelm barely moved from his starting position, never unsheathing his unique-looking sword. He used the barest effort necessary to deflect or block each attack Cobalt initiated. Cobalt eventually retreated back, as they started to exchange some words. Not something rare in these types of matches, but the content was quite interesting. Some kind of precognition? Wilhelm voiced his thoughts on Cobalt's semblance. I looked up at James's face that seemed to confirm the young man's guesses. He has good eyes. I commented. No, Cobalt revealed it as a sort of danger sense. A more whimsical variation of precognition, one I have not heard of before. But his next words were the most surprising to hear. Why do none of them come close to the danger you give off? James, do you have information on Wilhelm? I asked. It appears as though this young man is going to have my undivided attention for now. If what Cobalt said was true, then this young man is someone we need to protect before Salem's forces are able to get their claws into him. Supposedly more dangerous than even Haven's teachers? I know they aren't the peak of huntsmen, but they are still extremely well trained and have decades of experience. Even if Cobalt was exaggerating, they needed to know more about this Wilhelm. Too many things are starting to appear around him that were strange. Too many coincidences. I'll have my people look into the records, but that isn't a name I can recall off the top of my head. James replied. It's possible he's from outside the kingdoms, but that is a long shot. And Cobalt all but confirmed that Wilhelm was holding back, substantially at that. I think we all held our breaths when he finally moved. The cameras didn't even correctly catch what happened. One moment he drew his sword, the next, Cobalt was falling to the ground in a puddle of blood and Wilhelm was sheathing his blade once again. How old did his application say he was? I asked. 20 years old. Glinda replied. What? James suddenly shouted, turned away from the screen. James, is something the matter? I looked up at him. OZ, change the channel to the news. I blinked at his comment. We weren't quite caught up with the live stream yet, but it seemed rather important. I messed with the device until a large breaking news flashed across the screen. We received word that notorious criminal Roman Torchwick and his partner Wilhelm Schweinorg have stolen a bullhead with Mistral authorities in pursuit. We have yet to calculate the damage they've caused in their wake, but my sources say that lethal force has been authorized. What the hell? Crow reeled back at the scene of a bullhead being chased by several more of Mistral's insignia on them. His words echoed my own thoughts as well. What happened between the end of his last match to now that he was now a wanted fugitive? The Mistral authorities were gaining on them, prepping their weapons, which would be a slaughter on that civilian craft they were trying to escape on. That was, until the back hangar door of the criminal's bullhead opened up, revealing Wilhelm staring at them from the distance. Suddenly, several swords appeared around him and shot out at the oncoming authorities. But that isn't what grabbed my attention. I couldn't help but abruptly standing up, slamming my controls to pause the screen. Ashvin! Glinda exclaimed in shock as all eyes were on me. That's the relic of destruction. I pointed towards the screen, completely flabbergasted. Wait, what? Crow looked at me. Isn't it supposed to be locked under Shade Academy? James mirrored my own expression once he realized the significance of what I had just said. Are you sure that's the relic, Oz? James, I personally stored the sword under the academy, I would never forget what it looks like. How I wish it were that simple. Even its design was something not known to the greater world. The vacuo symbol, not giving the details of their relic away. Oz, how did some brat get his hands on the relic? Crow actually seemed a little worried himself. I don't know, Crow. I don't know. I couldn't fathom how it was possible. The pocket dimension I created should have been inaccessible to anyone but the maiden whose magical signature I used to lock it in place. I hesitated, but I continued the video. At this point, we needed all the information we could get. The sword cut through the oncoming bullhead like a scythe through wheat. It made me question the other swords next to the relic if they were able to keep up like that. Magical items? Who was this young man? Holy crap, that is a big fucking Sifei Long. Crow muttered as the massive beast appeared on screen, grabbing everyone's attention. Ojben, how far away are they from us? Glinda's mind immediately went to assistance. Too far. I mumbled. It would take a couple hours to get there if we left this moment. I watched as she clenched her hands in frustration. A Sifei Long of that size, it was probably a few centuries away from becoming a titan. Even if we could muster some forces, it would probably take the Atlas military to put it down, and even then, it was probably smart enough to submerge if the fight looked unfavorable. Ether cannon. The words of young Wilhelm echoed out through the video. The boy appearing high up in the sky through a portal, a question I had before now answered. But my attention was more on his glowing sword and the unleashed attack that seemed to completely obliterate the large Grim. I was left utterly speechless. A feeling in my heart I had not thought would come again. A single word jumping to the forefront of my mind. Magic. Ojben, are you listening? I was broken from my thoughts. Yes, yes. I looked up at the screen with James. I apologize, my thoughts have been all over the place these past few days. Can you repeat what you said? I was going over the report by my subordinates in Vale. He grumbled, but let up with a sigh. It would be easier if I was allowed a full operation. James, we both know the Council would never allow you to wantonly move in their territory with your military assets unless it was an emergency. James was many things, but sometimes aggressive took the top of the list. James grunted in agreement but continued. As I was saying, reports are that Roman Torchwick and Wilhelm Schweinorg were meeting at a place known as Juniors Club, but we can't seem to find them after they entered. We searched everywhere, my agents even infiltrated the establishment during late hours, but there was no sign of any of them. It seems we missed our window of opportunity, they are in the wind already. They have to have left some kind of trail. James slammed his fist on his desk. He was a prideful man, getting outsmarted by a young man and a lowly thief probably didn't do his ego any favors. Not only that, but I can't even touch the owner because the Council keeps stonewalling me. He practically growled. Junior. I muttered the name. I believe he is the information broker that Krog sometimes visits? It would make sense that he knows a few secrets the Council does not wish to leak. Ojben, I need you to sign some papers regarding. Glinda walked into the office and pauses when she noticed Ironwood on the screen. I apologize, I did not realize you were in meeting, shall I come back? It's fine, Glinda. Ironwood hastily reassured her. It's nothing official. He emphasized what they were speaking about, or rather the lack thereof. I see, I suppose I shall listen and then. She stepped behind me, setting some papers on my desk that I would no doubt be going through in a few minutes. Fine, fine. I'll do it for real. I tried to appease her, perhaps I was teasing her too much just now. But she didn't shake her annoyed expression. I walked up as she turned away, arms wrapping around her. Jin. I lightly caressed her cheek. I'm sorry, I went too far. She huffed again, not answering. Jin, what can I do to apologize? I whispered, next to her ear, before they truly caught my attention. They were very cute, very pointy, I couldn't help myself. Nom. HNN, she made a little sound, a squeak in surprise escaped her lips. I paused, releasing her ear, looking down at her face, which was turning a bright shade of red. Oh my, are your ears sensitive? Made me want to keep nibbling. Is that a question? She turned even redder. I want to speak with Draig. She changed the subject. I raised an eyebrow, summoning the boosted gear. Hello, Jin. Draig greeted happily. Hello, Draig. Jin was happy to return the greeting. It was probably something she wasn't used to, an experience that was still novel. I have a question. Oh, ask away. Is it possible to take things into that gauntlet? She pointed at the boosted gear. It is. Do you wish to come and stay in here with me? Can I truly? Her eyes lit up. Huh, I didn't think about that. If he agrees, and that's what you want. I added. It would be a good way for her to have company instead of me keeping her in her lamp all the time. I have never had a roommate before. Drake seemed amused. Though, this is more of a prison for me, you would be sequestered to the side, unfortunately. But we will be able to speak whenever you wish. Jin looked excited at the prospect, and I'm glad it made her happy. Does that mean I'm out of the doghouse? She turned back at me, a small twitch on her lips. Ask your question. She still turned slightly red. Alright, I won't tease you anymore. I put my hands up in surrender. Humph, she raised her hands, and time stopped again. This is really a nice application of magic. Drake commented. Thank you. She beamed again. At least someone appreciates my effort. She glared at me. Okay, I deserve that. I admitted before getting serious. Since we're leaving soon, I figured I would see the origin of the Grimm. It was on the old man's list. He was curious how they came about, but at this point it was probably an easy to guess at who created them. The familiar scene occurred, knowledge flooding the surroundings, conveying their contents in more than just words. The brother gods. One of light, and one of darkness. It was the god of darkness who created them Grimm. His motivations were hard to discern. I suppose I didn't word my question as broadly to allow that. It shifted as many types of Grimm were created, some by hand, some mutations, and others surprisingly evolved over time or with a purpose. The older they became, the more intelligent until they cast off their construct origins and became something akin to phantasmal species. Fascinating. I made many mental notes until the visions shifted again. A woman appeared on the screen, becoming the predominant focus. Red eyes, pale skin, cursed marks on her body. She stood above these huge pools of inky darkness as more Grimm emerged in new shapes and forms. Salem, the queen of the Grimm. Jin revealed. She is. Step on me, mommy. What? The scenes collapsed abruptly. What? What? Ashvin, headmaster of Beacon, POV. I hummed to myself, stirring my hot cocoa gently, adding a dash of nutmeg to give it a little pop. Taking a sip, I leaned back and admired the taste. After living for an uncountable number of years, one learns to appreciate the small pleasures in life. It gave scope, context, to why the fight was worth continuing each day. Standing up, I walked towards the rotunda windows that circled my office, my tower that overlooked the school. A wizard I may no longer be, but a tower I still built myself. No longer did it house arcane secrets, magical facilities, and cosmic powers. Instead, it now overlooked the next generation. The eager, young faces of youth, the heroes of tomorrow. Those who would take up arms and defend humanity from the monsters that go bump in the night. It was not a position to lord myself over those below, to create a sense of self-importance, despite what my students may think. A reminder. To see, every day when I look out the window in the morning, what it was I exactly fighting for. Every face that would one day not return to their friends and family, their happy faces carved into my soul, that even after reincarnating, I would never forget. The sins I had to bear. So that, one day, this would no longer be necessary. Weapons would be let go because monsters no longer banged on their doors. Unfortunately, today was not that day, nor would it be tomorrow, and most likely not be grasped within this lifetime. My idle muse was broken as the door to the elevator opened. Hello, Glinda. I greeted my deputy headmistress. Hello, Ashvin. She returned a small smile. Have you started watching yet? I was tempted. I smiled lightly. But you know how James gets when we start without him. She didn't seem to give it much thought herself. What about Crow, is he? I'm here. A slightly slurred voice caught our attention as the man shifted from his bird form back into human. James noticeably perked up now that Glinda joined in. I resisted the urge to lightly tease them about it, but I held back the urge. Their relationship was already an awkward one. I did not wish to rock the boat anymore. And what is your next plan of action, James? Well, I already have my people looking up every suitable physician with the correct credentials. He stated. I let out a long sigh, taking my glasses off and rubbing my eyes. What? Glinda looked at me. Crow decided to contribute the theory that Wilhelm Schweinorg is the summer maiden who had a sex change operation. James has taken that theory to heart. Glinda blinked at that, before face-palming. James. I know how it sounds. James cut her off. But hear me out. We know he possessed the Relic of Destruction, which requires the Summer Maiden to access Below Shade Academy. That doesn't prove anything, James. Maybe he's working with the Summer Maiden? Maybe the maiden stumbled on the sword at some point in the past 100 years or so, and sold it, not knowing what it was. Glinda offered a very valid explanation. Then how do you explain the magic? He countered, but neither me nor Glinda had an answer to that, so he continued on. James clicked a few buttons on his console, bringing up a close-up of Wilhelm Schweinorg. Look at his features. He pointed at the screen. The cheekbones, the angles of his face. They're too delicate. Not to mention the curvature of his nose. My people analyzed it and they gave a 42% chance of it belonging to a female, based on comparisons. He didn't finish there. Not to mention the testimony from your own student, Coco Adele. Coco? Glinda asked. How does she know him? They met at a clothing store. According to Coco, Wilhelm made comments regarding her choice in fashion which they had an argument about it. James nodded to himself. James, that is approaching the boundary of sexism. I pointed out, Glinda seemingly raising an eyebrow in response to his words. I know how it sounds, but tell me I'm wrong, that this isn't behavior predominant for women? That's not untrue. Glinda admitted. Objectively, I can agree that is behavior I would expect from a female opposed to a male. Not to mention that Crow himself said that Wilhelm seemed soft and delicate when they first met. You know how much of a womanizer he is. While I would never take his word as gospel, he is technically an expert in this area. James stated. James, he was saying that to mess with you. Oz, admit it, we have ample evidence to at least give credence to the theory. James turned back to me. The relic under the Watch of Summer in his possession, his apparent ability to use magic. Statistical evidence of his features leaning towards a female variation. His behavior with Coco, even with Glinda's agreement. And Crow's words added on. I blinked for a moment, mulling it over. Truthfully, it was quite a few coincidences piling up, all of it mere circumstantial evidence, but when presented all together like that, it started to paint a vague picture. I still can't fathom a way for him to have acquired magic. All tests in the past several centuries shown that my magic could not be passed down genetic lines, regardless of if it was me or the maidens I gifted magic to all those years ago. Those 4 girls, I never conceived that they would suffer a fate similar to me. But instead of reincarnated like I do after death, the magic I gifted to them was instead transferred to the person they were thinking about at their last moments, or rather, the woman. But if no woman was in their thoughts, it drifts through the world and attaches to a woman at random. The thought of Salem doing something similar never crossed my mind. I refused to believe she would ever trust someone enough to give up a portion of her magic to them. As much as I didn't want to admit it. Fine. I acquiesced. The evidence, and I use that term very loosely here, seems to support the notion. James looked rather smug, and Glinda, surprisingly didn't admonish me for the confirmation of James's theory. Brothers help me, I can't believe I'm even considering this. What a nice day it is. I turned around to admire the view. We going to talk about what just happened? The sun is shining, the birds are chirping. Literally no birds out right now, and the sun is setting as we speak. You know? It's the perfect evening to go for a walk. To the Grimlands, I assume? Draeg's flat voice was quite clear. What a wonderful idea, Draeg. Of course, it has nothing to do with the woman we just saw, right? Woman, what women? Right, definitely not the woman you proclaimed you wanted to step on you. You say the silliest things, Draeg. Are you really going to the Grimlands to meet Salem? Jin looked at me with surprise. Draeg convinced me. I replied. I hate you. I do not know the extent of your magical capabilities, but she is an accomplished witch. Do not underestimate her. Jin said sternly. The fact that you can tell me something like that means it falls in line with my questions. I rubbed my chin. She just smiled happily. I have a little bit of leeway with your wording. She floated towards me through the air lazily. Well, if you can convince her to cease her production of Grimm, it would benefit the world. Joking aside, this was somewhat a serious matter. Would she be so easily convinced? I would like this place to stop being a death world if possible. Anything is possible. She shrugged. I assume you would not wish to reveal yourself? The supposed queen of the Grimm, she probably knew about the relics. She shook her head. Want to go inside the boosted gear with Dreyeg? Yes, please. She smiled brightly, turning into a wisp of smoke and returning to the lamp. Cute. I would tease her more later. Dreyeg, you ready? Push it against the gauntlet. I pushed the two divinely created objects together, the gauntlet taking in the lamp. Oh, this is strange. I heard Jin's voice from within the gauntlet. Hang on, let me move the coffee table so we can set you up properly. Wait, what? I'll show you around, we have the kitchen in the back. A game area in the lounge and a spare bedroom, but it's currently full of some stuff I was storing. Give me a little bit and I'll clear it out for you. You're fucking with me. Oh, what's this? Pool table. Nope, not going to fall for it. I just heard the both of them start giggling. This decision may be one I come to regret in the future. I ignored their antics for now, for I had something much more important to focus on. Taking out a mirror, I made sure my hair wasn't unkempt. I straightened my tie and checked for any unwanted creases in my clothes. With a nod of satisfaction, I took out my hat and sat it on my head. With Mirage in my hand, I swiped the sword through the air, creating a new portal to a new location on Remnant. The darkness practically seeped out as I stepped through. As if in a perpetual twilight, the place I found myself in was blanketed in a dense aura of darkness that didn't allow much light through. Immediately, several figures charged at me. Grim, large ones. They were basic Beowulfs, except many more bone protrusions, and much bulkier. There was a term for this, I believe they're called alphas? A more advanced version of a very basic breed. I didn't pay them much mind, they looked to be sturdier than the average, but their speed still left much to be desired. A slight movement to avoid claws crashing down at me, and a quick swipe of my sword decapitated them all the same. I hummed to myself as I gathered another soil sample. I had a feeling this one would be particularly noteworthy when they were all studied together. But that was for later, I didn't want to get sidetracked. Turning to the north, I could see a large castle not too far away. I casually strode towards it, Grim being felled in my wake. I don't think any of the particularly smart ones moved towards me as I felt some unique presences in the nearby forestry, which was surprising in of itself because Grim were hard to notice. But I was assuming these were the older variety with more of a presence to them, thus more easily noticeable by such means. As I got closer, I noticed how ancient the place looked, and more importantly, the amount of magical energy that seemed to pulse off the entire structure. I had no doubt in my mind that it was being held together by magical means at this point. Welp, time to walk right into a Magus's workshop, or rather this world's equivalent. What could possibly go wrong? This is going to end horribly. Probably. I feel like we've been here before, like a very similar scenario played out not that long before. No idea what you're talking about. I smiled wistfully. The massive doors at the entrance creaked something fierce when I pushed them open, and as I walked in, the entire castle seemingly came alive. Strange crystal growths lit up like lamps, the windows took on a strange hue and the whole place felt like it was watching me. I didn't focus on it too much, because at the end of this huge room was a throne, and a red pair of eyes bore down on me atop it. I met her gaze, a small bit of interest was returned, perhaps the novelty of her receiving a visitor all the way out here? Call me skeptical, but I don't think this place was exactly a tourist location. The Grimlands were no man's land. There were no settlements here, no life beyond what this woman allowed and the Grimm that roamed. A whole continent forced into perpetual darkness that allowed nothing to thrive. I walked forward without hesitation, our gazes never leaving one another. I have come for the Queen of Grimm. I declared my intentions. I was nothing if not theatrical when the opportunity presented itself. She showed a small movement, her head tilting ever so slightly as I called her out, amusement seemingly overtaking her previous interest. One of Ozma's champions? Her voice was calm, but authoritative. It held the same grace that Artoria often presented when she decided to don her regal mask. I suppose he goes by Ozvin in this era. She continued. Have you come to throw yourself at me, to test my immortality? Or did he not even reveal that secret to you? He was ever so good at making sure his pawns only knew the barest bit of information. Or maybe you are playing messenger. She quirked the smallest smile, one that threatened quite a bit of pain. Does Ozvin have words to say to me after all these years? No idea who Ozvin was, but it didn't matter. I walked a few more paces until she was only about a dozen feet in front of me. Any chance you could stop creating more grim? I mean, it was worth a shot? She stared at me for a moment before breaking out in laughter. It was honestly kind of cute. I will admit, Ozma has never tried that particular approach before. She finally calmed herself down. I guess that's a no then? She had a humorous smile on her face. It has been a great many years since I've been made to laugh such as this. You are granted my mercy and may return to Ozma, though whether you can survive the grim outside is left up to fate. She practically shooed me away. Huh. Actually, I have another question. She raised an eyebrow at me expectantly. And pray tell, what does Ozma wish to convey? Are you seeing anyone right now? Still no idea who the hell this Ozma was, but I would rather not flirt with someone who was in a relationship, that's just scummy. Whatever she thought I was going to say, that clearly wasn't it. The tapping of her finger ceased, and she stared at me incredulously. Are you mocking me? Did Ozma send you to jest in my presence? Her eyes began to glow, a visible phenomenon of her drawing upon her magic. I no longer care why you have appeared here, be reduced to ashes along with all his previous champions. She raised her hand and an impressive amount of fire formed, spraying down on me. Oh boy, I apparently said something wrong. I flicked my hand, a greater ward cast to block the attack. The torrent only lasted for another moment, enough that she looked on in shock as I was left unmolested by her flames. She stood up from her throne, eyes widened at what she had just witnessed. With another wave of her hand, lightning struck out. It was easily deflected, another quick ward absorbing and dispersing it. She took a step forward, ice burst out from her steps, covering the entire room in a thick coat as it began to form up like blades from the ground and burst at me. Runes flickered around my body, a wall of flames burst out to meet it head-on and melt away the magical attack. She took a few more steps forward, hand extended and the gravity around me suddenly increased several folds. I instinctively cast a reinforcement on my body to counterattack the additional gravitational force, but it continued to increase, enough that the ground distorted at the epicenter. Mirage gripped in my hand, I swung up, pulling on the kaleidoscope to distort the space around us, diapering her momentary gravitational irregularity she created. It was surprising in the ease of which she could mess with gravity, such a thing is considered a very high thaumaturgy back home. How is this possible? She stared at me as if seeing a ghost. You are no maiden, and it is not possible for Ozma to gift more magic with his reduced state. How did he acquire a man with magic? Okay, real talk, I have no idea who Ozma is. I admitted. She reached out, almost as if to touch me and pulled away. You are not one of Ozma's? Nope. No idea who the fuck that was. She looked at me, studying my face for any kind of deceit. She opened her mouth, perhaps wishing to ask many questions that clearly brought a flurry of emotions to her face, but she hesitated for a moment before finally speaking. Who are you? Why have you come to my domain? Wilhelm Henry Schweinorg. I introduced myself, expressing proper etiquette to someone of royalty as I took my hat off. As for why I came here, I reached into my hat and pulled out a bouquet of flowers, holding them up for her to take. I believe I already answered that question. Her mouth hung ajar, seemingly incapable of believing what I was doing. With stiff movement, she reached out hesitantly and received the bundle of flowers, unsure of what to do with them. She stared at them for a moment before sweeping her gaze around the room, pursing her lips and mulling over something before speaking again. You are offered guest rights in my domain. She spoke evenly. No Grim will attack you here while you are under my aegis. Well, this somehow worked out. I thank you for your protection, your majesty. She looked me over again before turning away. I think I saw a pleased look on her face at how I addressed her. You shall follow me to the dining room, she stated, leaving no room for rebuttal. I just shrugged as she led me through her castle. Truthfully, I didn't care where she was leading me right now, as long as I can keep watching that ass sway. I don't think even Scathack had anything on that bounce. Eventually, she led me to a room with a large table, as one would expected in such a castle. She gestured for me to sit down at one end, and I obliged as was etiquette. She extended guest rights to me, and I would be polite. She sauntered off somewhere, only to return a moment later, a glass vase half filled with water and the flowers I gave her sticking out of it as she sat it down on the center of the table. Taking a seat opposite of me, there was an awkward silence that now filled the room. You possess magic. She finally spoke, clearly having many questions. Yes. I said plainly. Are there others? She asked hesitantly. I shrugged. Who knows? She pursed her lips, clearly not liking my answer. Why are you making more grim? She raised an eyebrow. Who knows? She replied, mimicking my tone. Touché. Well, I could tell right away that this was going to go nowhere fast. Might as well try for a change of pace. How about a game? A game? I wanted to know some stuff about her, she wanted to know some stuff about me. One person asks a question, the other person has to either answer it or pass, and that question cannot be asked again in any form. If you pass on one question, you must answer the next one, no matter what. We each take turns ask the other a question. And what is to stop either of us from lying? Pride? I offered. She paused, mulling that over. I accept. Who shall be going first? That was technically a question. I pointed out to a small bit annoyance on her face. But ladies first. I gave a smile. She tapped her finger on the table. How did you acquire magic? I was born with it. I replied. Why did you assume I was with this Ozma person? Very few people are aware of my existence, it was a natural assumption to make since he is an enemy I've had over the past millennia. She stated. Are there others like you, born with the capability of magic? Yup. I said plainly. I could tell she was kicking herself for not asking a more thorough question here. Do you live here all by yourself? I have subordinates who come and go with my orders. She chose her words carefully. Who taught you your spells? Such skills are hardly self-learned. My grandfather. I said lazily, much to her surprise. It wasn't incorrect, but a lot of context was missing. You never did answer my original question, are you in a relationship right now? She frowned, possibly irritated with my question. I am not. She tapped her finger rhythmically, clearly mulling over some thoughts. Are you aware of the relics? Oh, going straight there. Yes. I said simply, and her eyes brightened. Do you find me attractive? I wonder how long I can go before she gets fed up with my questions. She paused, perhaps trying to find the correct words. You are handsome, was her blunt reply, but it made me smile. What do you know of the relics? I know a lot about the relics, you're going to have to be more specific or we'll be here all day. Fine. She responded. Where are the relics located? The relic of creation is being used to keep Atlas floating in the sky, so the center of that whole thing. The relic of choice is in a pocket dimension under beacon, and the relic of destruction and relic of knowledge are with me. I smirked at her widening eyes. I flashed my hand, the sword of destruction appearing next to me, floating in the air. You. She stared at it quietly as I made it go back into my ring. I wagged my finger. It's my turn. Fine, ask your question. She scowled. What's your relationship with Ozma? Honestly, it felt like there was a lot of history there. Pass. She said almost immediately, much to my surprise. What would it take to acquire those relics from you? Pass. I gave a cheeky smile, much to her annoyance. Did you intentionally do your hair up like that to look like a spider? It was actually pretty cute. She twitched slightly. Yes, was her curt reply. Would your grandfather be amenable to discourse? Probably, I can't speak on his behalf. I said honestly. I'm sure he would enjoy talking about magic if nothing else. Do you like rabbits? Do you intend to keep asking these nonsensical questions? She scowled again. Yes. She rolled her eyes. Where is your grandfather located? Pass. I easily skipped that one. What's your favorite color? She seemed increasingly annoyed by my non-question, but answered all the same. Black. She said clearly, but her lips curled up into a smile. What is a secret you don't wish me to know? That seems like it's against the spirit of the rules. I pointed out. You had passed your previous question and there were no rules against this course of action. She looked very pleased with herself. Okay, if you want to play it this way. Shame, is that something you can eat? I was staring at your ass the entire time we walked through your castle. She blinked at me before my words finally settled in, her mouth opened slightly. What color panties are you wearing? I think I saw her cheeks turn the faintest red for a very brief moment. What kind of question is that? She looked at me indignantly. You don't have to answer. The corners of my lips twitched upwards. Feel free to pass, who knows what I'll ask next, though. I wiggled my eyebrows for added effect. She didn't outwardly react, nor did she make a motion to try and harm me. I'm not wearing any panties. She grit out. Oh my. She stood up, slamming her hands on the table. We are done. She started walking towards the door before pausing at the threshold. You will receive a guest room for the night, she stated before departing. Looks like I won. As amusing as it was to watch Salem get flustered. What was the point of that? Jin's voice echoed out. I wanted to get a feel for her as a person. I shrugged. I wasn't going to ignore everything about her because I found her physically attractive, nor was I head over heels in love or some other nonsense. I was interested, for lack of a better word, and I didn't plan on pulling a Meridia again. To see how thin that veil of civility was. When she realized I was using magic, she changed her entire tone. I wanted to see if it was an act or not. Being a shameless flirt was just a bonus. I expected her to try and blast me at the end there, she didn't, so that speaks a bit about her. And what are your plans now? She offered me a room for the night, it would be rude to refuse. I chuckled. I don't doubt she will try to reinitiate again at a later time, perhaps when she had time to think everything over. Knowing that magic is basically non-existent here bar a few, it probably threw her for a loop that I popped up here with the capability. I'm curious what she'll have in store for me later. I woke up rather refreshed. Sleep was more something I did because I enjoyed it and to relieve any kind of stress. My body no longer needed to physically sleep, as in there would be no noticeable detriments to my body, besides mental fatigue and the like. It was a large room, a bed that could easily fit 5 people. Extravagant would perhaps be too mundane word to describe this room. As expected of a person who claims to be royalty. Almost out of habit, I pulled out my scroll, poking at it a few times to check the news. Just as Junior said, the Vale Council came out in support of Mistral. I guess what happened was too high profile for them to stay quiet, especially since we were known to live in Vale. We got thrown under the bus immediately as well, pretty much blamed for everything that happened. I mean, technically we did, but there was also the fact that the authorities were pretty damn aggressive with their actions. At least they got my good side with my wanted picture. Wait. I muttered, staring at my scroll. How am I getting a signal now out here? Remnant wasn't like Earth with satellites in space, they had massive towers that broadcasted throughout each kingdom, and I am certainly very far from any kingdom. Curious. With a hum, I snapped my fingers, the bounded fields I set around the room came down. Contrary to what one may expect, it was considered polite to put up your own defenses like this when inside another mage's domain you were invited into. While I don't know if that particular bit of etiquette carried over here, I did put up some basic defenses. It was basically something like you are a dangerous person, therefore I will protect myself, but with a certain politeness to it, as well as it being compliment to the host. Fixing myself up, brushing my hair and making sure my clothes were tidy, I left my room. Immediately greeting me was a strange creature. A grim, obvious from the looks of it, but it was like a floating octopus. It didn't react to my presence, just merely floating there. I poked it. There was no reaction, so I poked it again. And again. Well, whatever. I turned to walk away, and it began following. Every step I took, it was there floating behind me. Well, would you happen to know where the kitchens are? I poked the floating grim again. It made a sound. I don't know what it was trying to convey, but one of its tentacles lifted, pointing down the hallway. I just shrugged and went off with my new friend following behind me. The kettle hissed, steam shooting out. Would you like some tea? I eyed the person who entered the kitchen out of the corner of my eye. Salem walked in, she gave me an inquisitive look before taking a seat at the very large table. I do not require sustenance. Needing and wanting are 2 different things. I replied, putting a little bit of sugar in my cup before stirring it. I technically no longer require sustenance either, but enjoying the taste of food and drink is one of life's pleasures. If you are offering, then I shall not refuse. She said plainly. I poured a second cup and took it down to the table, setting it in front of her as I took a seat nearby. Oh, before I forget. I waved my hand, allowing a small platter to appear between us. I have mint, cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger, basil, and lemon if you prefer any of those, along with some basic sugar if you don't want yours plain. Raised Japanese, lived in England, my tea game is always on point, though I've been leaning towards English tea standards lately. Honestly, my reserves of the Japanese variety are minuscule in comparison. I'll need to pick up some good tea leaves next time I head back to my home country. She looked at them curiously, taking a small spoon and added a couple things to her cup before stirring gently. I saw her take a small sip and a very brief expression of content crossed her face. It is acceptable. I'm glad you like it. I took a sip of my own. I looked her over again. She was wearing something slightly different today. It was more or less the same design, but this black dress she was wearing hugged her body much better than before, not to mention the boob window was much more pronounced. I had to stop myself from staring too much. Her hair appeared to be more preen as well, like instead of a casual acceptance, she took the time to make sure everything was nice and tidy. I think she noticed my looks because a small smile quirked on her face. You look lovely. I decided to voice my thoughts. She didn't respond to it, but I think she was pleased by my words. Were the accommodations acceptable? They were. I slept very well. I replied. And my new friend was helpful. I gestured towards the grim still floating in the corner. She glanced at it. It is one of my more intelligent creations. It can help with basic tasks. Oh, is this one of the ones you made? I gave it another look. It makes me curious as to what abilities it possesses. The grim interest you? She asked, a small look of intrigue on her face. Of course, it was one of the reasons I decided to come here. I admitted. One of the reasons? She raised an eyebrow, adjusting herself. I was surprised she attempted to show off more of her bosom. Was she trying to seduce me? Or at least make me more willing to reveal information this way? How amusing. Indeed. I smiled innocent, not reacting to her obvious insinuation. I think she was slightly annoyed as well, relaxing back again without her chest puffed out. Was she expecting me to just start drooling with her breasts on display? I mean, I would normally, but I also don't like being led around by the nose, or rather the dick in this circumstance. The Grimm are rather interesting creatures though. A magical construct that mimics lifeforms to the extent that their source of magical energy forces them to exist with the same weaknesses. She perked up slightly. An interesting notion, to claim my Grimm have the same weaknesses as normal beasts. Don't they? Sure, they may be significantly stronger than a normal animal, but if you stab a Grimm through the head, it will die same as its normal counterpart. Magical energy, the term you used, if they were sustained on such a thing, why would their existence care about something as mundane as a stab to the head? The concepts woven in their creation. I can only assume that at their base, they use the templates of real creatures to build their foundations, to give the magical energy a form to bind and give structure to. Otherwise, each Grimm would need to be created from the ground up, and the effort and time to do so would make such a thing simply inefficient. I don't doubt you've perhaps done so in the past, but to put out the numbers that currently inhabit the world, the simplest method to mass produce them would be required, which would inherently come with certain detriments. She blinked at my response, lost in thought for a moment, before responding. You are quite knowledgeable. I had not expected you to be able to discern such things without experience of their creation. Well, I am a researcher before anything else. I smiled. Grimm are a curious thing that drew my attention. At my core, and that of Zelretch, we are researchers, and I don't think that would ever change. I'm curious about the ease at which you were able to manipulate gravity as well. Oh, that? She genuinely seemed happy for my words, like she was unused to receiving praise. It was just a small trick to condense the natural gravity in the area. She gave a small smile. But you seemed capable enough to destroy my spell with ease. I was forced to distort the local space to disrupt your gravitational increase. It had caught me by surprise. I don't know many people capable of manipulating gravity with such ease. That was a bit simpler in explanation. I actually had to quickly alter the curvature of the surrounding space to even out the gravitational anomaly she created. So, there are many people you know capable of magic? She asked, but I gave a non-committal hum. Perhaps we should restart our game from where we left off? You're not worried about what I may ask? She seemed a bit flustered yesterday. If you wish to waste questions on asking me about my undergarments, why would I be bothered? Perhaps my answer will have changed since yesterday. She gave a coquettish smile, though it seemed a bit insincere. I knew what she was doing, but... All right, same rules as yesterday. Are you my enemy? She asked me bluntly. It was a simple question, but one she probably should have asked yesterday. I think she was just too thrown off by my sudden appearance to clearly think through everything. At the moment, no. But I can't claim to see the future. She didn't react, so I assumed she accepted that answer. Do you hate humanity? What? She seemed a bit taken back by my question. Well, you create Grimm, which are essentially the enemies of humanity and faunus, for that matter. I'm just curious if you hate them. She looked contemplative at my question, a scowl formed as she seemingly thought deeper on it. I do not hate humanity. These things that exist now are not the humanity I know. They lack magic, they lack the same things that made humanity whole. They are but a hollow shell of what they are supposed to be. She didn't elaborate beyond that, but I could understand her sentiments. It also filled in some blanks regarding this world's history, and I think she assumed I knew of it as well. I guess in a previous time, humanity was capable of magic on a much larger scale, and they somehow lost it. It would explain why she was fixated on my apparent usage of magic and anyone I knew who could use it as well. What were your intentions in coming here? She finally asked. Which was another question that should have been answered yesterday had she had more time to contemplate. I wanted a measure of the person who ruled over the Grimm. I responded. What is your end goal? End goal? She questioned my wording. What do you hope to achieve with all of? I waved my arms around. This? She was silent for a moment. Pass. She stated. What did you mean by a measure? I used the relic of knowledge to learn about the Grimm. I saw several images of you and was smitten, so I wished to get an understanding of you better to see if there was a chance in the future. I explained. But I digress. I stopped her from responding and asked my question. What would it take for you to stop using the Grimm to attack people? That depends on what you are willing to give. I suppose I can be persuaded. She stared at me intently. My lips quirked up. Did she not realize how that could be interpreted? If my innocence is what is required to stop people from dying, then I shall give myself to you. Salem blinked, registering what I said. I was speaking of the relics. She huffed. Do your perversions know no bounds? Says the woman trying to seduce me. I pointed out. I have done no such thing. She crossed her arms, covering her ample boob window. I don't think she expected me to call her out on it. Oh, and if I ask that as my next question? I decided to prod her again. It is my question. She said, turning away and changing the subject, only taking a glance back at me again when she appeared ready to speak. Why are you being so blunt? I finished for her. Yes. Actually got her to waste a question for something like this. I don't see the point in being coy or ambiguous. I see something I like so I go for it, simple as that. I guess she was not used to people being so obvious in their attractions. I'd rather not play those games. If someone isn't interested, I'd rather be told up front rather than waste my time. Do you dislike it? I think she hesitated for a moment. I believe I am done for now. She stood up, leaving the room. Did I do something wrong there? Did I press a button I shouldn't have? Maybe I should apologize? If you want to support me, check out my Patreon at https://www.patreon.com/Kayashin. I tend to polls that decide important plot stuff in my P at Trian. Many thanks to my awesome patrons. Ben Phillips. If you liked the content, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. I'll stay here until next time.